Battleships are among the most popular class of ship in game, especially for new players. With their heavy armor, large main battery guns, and bristling with secondary guns, it's easy to see why. A little while ago, we went over what battleship line is right for you in 2024. What we're going to do today is expand on that and go over what battleship build you should be using in order to get the most out of your battleship in 2024. Keep in mind that in this video we are going over builds that you can use across multiple different ships in the class. There are one or two battleships out there that have unique traits that can lead to them having vastly different builds than what most other battleships do. If you are curious about a particular battleship like one of those highly unique battleships, there is a very good chance that I probably have made several videos on it, which you can find in my ship review playlist if you're interested in one of those. Also, while I will be putting chapters on the timeline so you can navigate to the build that interests you the most, I would highly encourage you guys to watch the first build, as it is the base we will be modifying going forward with our other builds. So let's go ahead and get started with that base build. Also, if you do find this video informational, helpful, or entertaining, please make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Of course, it helps out on the YouTube side of things. So the best all-around battleship build out of the box. So this build will work on just about every single battleship in the game because it builds into what makes a battleship, their tankiness and their guns. The aim of this build is to make your ship survive as much punishment as possible and stay in the fight, focusing on improving the performance of your main battery guns. We'll start with the modules. Now, if you don't know, you do not have access to every module slot until Tier 9. So for ships lower than Tier 9, simply follow the module build as best you can with the module slots you have available. So starting with the first module slot, you want to take Main Battery Mod 1. This module reduces the chance of your main battery guns being knocked out by 20% and reduces the repair time if they do get knocked out by 20% as well. Furthermore, it increases their survivability by 50%. Obviously, the main battery guns are the main source of damage on most battleships, so we want them to stay in the fight as much as possible, and this module helps with that. The second mod slot is Damage Control Systems Mod 1. Damage Con Mod 1 reduces the chance that you'll catch on fire by 5%, and reduces the chance of you catching an instance of flooding by 3%. The armor of battleships is so thick that most other classes will spam you with HE, with the hope of setting you on fire and burning through your massive amount of health that way. This reduces the chance of that happening by 5%. It may not sound like much, but every single bit helps. Same with flooding. Torpedoes deal massive damage to your battleship, and then to add insult into injury, will apply an instance of flooding to your battleship, or at least they have a very high chance of it, again chewing through your health. So any way that we can get those chances lower, we need to take it. For the third mod slot, you want to take Dispersion Mod. The Dispersion Mod will reduce your main battery dispersion by 7%, meaning that the maximum distance your shells will fly apart will be reduced by 7%. Again, it may not sound like that much, but when you're firing battleship caliber guns, just getting one more shell to hit can make all the difference. If you're building an American battleship, you want to take Artillery Plotting Room Mod 1 here for the extra range for your main battery guns. As you can't get the normal dispersion module, you will get the Special Artillery Plotting Room Mod 2 module later on to improve your dispersion. So again, American, just take the Artillery Plotting Room Mod 1 module here. Alright, for the fourth slot, you want to take Damage Con Mod 2. As mentioned with the first Damage Con module, fires and floodings are a way for other classes to whittle away your health by bypassing your armor and applying these instances to your ship. So again, we want to minimize that as much as possible. This module does so by reducing the recovery time for both fires and floods by 15%. That's 15% less time losing your HP to fires and floods, which is exactly what we want. So in the fifth slot, you want to take Concealment Systems Mod 1. The Concealment module reduces your ship's detection by 10%. This is a range at which other players can spot your ship and make you visible to the enemy team. Getting this as low as possible will make it easier for you to disengage from the enemy team and reposition if you need to. Battleships tend to have massive detection ranges due to their size, so reducing this as much as possible is key to your survival. If you can't be seen, you can't. usually, be shot. Also, it has the bonus effect of increasing the dispersion of shells shot at you by 5%. Again, taking 1 or 2 less shells can make all the difference in the world. So in the 6th slot, you want to take, well, one of several modules. So it's going to depend upon one of 3 things here. 1, the reload time of your particular battleship's guns. 2, the range of your guns. And then 3, if you're playing an American battleship. So only Tier 9 and 10 ships in the Arkansas beta can take this module. So my rule is typically this. If the battleship I'm playing has a max range around 24 kilometers, or has a spotter that can get me out to roughly that range, I'll take the reload module for the faster reload. A 12% buff to your reload time is massive when you're talking about battleship guns. So I typically will take this over range. However, if you cannot get into range to even use your guns, it is kind of pointless. So that's when the range mod comes in. On my Colombo, for example. Now, another instance is the Soviet battleships. They cannot take the range module, so you will just be essentially taking the reload module. If you're playing an American battleship, you have Artillery Plotting Room Mod 2 at your disposal. That gives you an 11% buff to your dispersion. So that's a no-brainer right there. Alright, moving on to the commander build. Just like with the modules, if you don't have a 21-point commander just yet, follow the guide as best you can until you do. Also, if you're looking into picking up a unique commander, check out my guide for that as well. So starting out with the 1-point skills, you're only going to really take one here, and that's preventative maintenance. This will reduce the chance of your main gun's steering gears, engine, and torpedo tubes from being knocked out, which there are few things that are more painful than being in a battleship with a busted engine. On top of that, it increases the survivability of your secondary guns and AA guns by 15%. And the only 2-point skill you'll be taking with this build will be Grease the Gears. This increases your main battery turret traverse speed by 20%. Needless to say, the vast majority of battleships have slow turret traverse speeds because your turrets are housing these massive guns and there's tons of armor on them, so naturally they are quite slow to turn. And this makes situations where you're having to maneuver frustrating due to that. So this helps you stay on target more often, keeps you going in the fights more often, because again, you're not wasting time having them rotate around, so definitely take this. Now, 3-point skills, you're going to take 2 here. First one is Adrenaline Rush. This is a must-have skill. Every single ship in the game sees you as a damaged pinata, and will treat you as such. What Adrenaline Rush does is give you a 0.2% reduction to your reload time for every 1% of HP lost. It may not sound like much, but trust me, it adds up. The second 3-point skill you're going to want to take is Basics of Survivability. This further reduces the flooding and firing covering time by another 15%. Again, less time burning, less time flooding, more HP for you. Alright, for your 4-point skills. What I would take first off would be Emergency Repair Expert. This increases the number of repairs and damage cons you have by 1. It increases their runtime by 10%. So this gives you an extra heal, which as a battleship you'll be taking lots of damage again. Everyone sees you as a damage pinata. So the ability to recover even more health is great. If you are a Soviet battleship player, this is essentially required as it gives you another damage con as well. Even if you're not doing this build, if you're playing a Soviet battleship, you pretty much should take this. The additional runtime it gives you with your heal is literally free health back, right? And the extra runtime on your damage con is that much more time where no fires or floods can be applied to your ship. So all around a great skill for battleships. Next up, I would definitely take Concealment Expert, and this further reduces your detection range by 10%. Again, controlling when you can disengage is a huge advantage, and this helps us to do that. And then lastly, I would take Fire Prevention. Fire Prevention reduces the risk of you catching on fire by 10% and removes the chance of you having 4 fires on your ship, as in you cannot have 4 fires, only 3. Again, fires suck, and this skill gives you a lower fire chance and ensures that you never will have the 4 instances of fire on your ship, which is amazing. If you've ever had 4 fires on your ship, you know just how painful that is. You're literally watching your HP melt away at an incredible rate at that point. So that right there is a maximum survivability / main gun build. You can slap this on every single battleship in the game and it will work fine. But there are some modifications that can be made depending on your playstyle or a particular battleship. And I'm going to run through a couple, but obviously, again, there's several battleship lines in this game by now, each with their own various playstyles and such, and as we go on, gimmicky nature. So you could, of course, make further modifications, but here are just some of the common ones that will work quite well. So, British battleships. The British BBs can forego taking grease the gears and instead take gun feeder, which reduces their switching time between shells by 40%. And they can take Demolition Expert for another 1% fire chance per shell. Since their HE already is literally god levels, if you don't know, the British battleships have an improved HE alpha. They have a massively improved fire rate compared to fire chance compared to other battleships. So they're a line that you'll be swapping back and forth between HE and AP on. Their AP is also quite good. It's short fuse AP. So there's various situations where you might be going around a corner and you catch a cruiser broadside with a short fuse AP. That will absolutely delete them, but you might have HE load. You take the gun feeder skill and you get that nice improvement to your shell switching time. So it makes it easier to swap back and forth between HE and AP. You could also take this, of course, with the Italian battleships and get their even more improved shell switching time down even quicker. And the Demolition Expert, yes, it's only 1% more between the... it's only a 1% more addition to their fire chance, which when you have like a 60-something fire percent chance, it may not seem like that much of a difference. But you combine that with the signal flags that you can take to boost your fire chance up even higher. It does add up, and I mean, hey, if you're going to burn the world down, might as well give yourself the best chance to burn the world down, right? So, besides that, also, you have what I like to call the Close Quarters Combat Expert. So, Close Quarters Combat is a skill that gives you a 10% buff to reload time once an enemy ship is spotted within your detection range. Hey guys, editing Sealord here. I just realized that I got the detection range mixed up with secondary range when talking about the Close Quarters skill. It is triggered by a ship being inside of your secondary range. Now, that is still very viable for ships like the Kremlin because you can slap a secondary flag on the Kremlin that also improves your AA performance, and that will get your secondary range out to 8-ish kilometers. And with how you play ships like the Kremlin and the Soviet battleships, you're typically within that range anyway, so it'll still work there. And that's what I originally meant. I don't know what happened. I don't know. Brain jam or whatever. But yeah, when I'm saying detection range with the close quarter skill, I do mean secondary range, so just know that going forward. It is a 4-point skill, so you could swap this out with Concealment Expert, since you know, you're more tuned for close quarters combat in ships like the Soviets, or again, even the Italians or the Germans. So you can remove that that Concealment Expert and replace it with Close Quarters Expert, to where when there's a ship that's spotted within your detection range, you get that 10% buff to your main battery reload time. Combine that with the reload module and Adrenaline Rush, and now you have a pretty quick reload time on your main battery guns that are, again, of a battleship caliber. So you can make yourself a bit more of a DPM, not exactly DPM hose, because you're still going to have like a 20-something second reload time at, like, you know, max Adrenaline Rush and with close quarters combat and the reload module equipped. But you'll be slinging some shells at a pretty quick rate, and this is a build I would, you know, recommend for, like, again, like the Kremlin, right? With its Soviet bias 18-inch shells being slung out every 20-something seconds, that is quite scary to try and deal with as someone being on the receiving end of that. So you could go with that. Does work out pretty well. And then, of course, we have the secondary build. So for the secondary battleships, again, going off of the original build we went over, and swap these modules out. So, again, this is like the German battleships, the Ohio, Massachusetts, the Georgia, the Rhode Island, if you want to be extra spicy with that, the Sicilia, and, again, the handful of other secondary ships in the game. So, for the first mod slot, you want to swap out Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1. You want to swap out Main Battery Mod 1 with Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1. And what this does is it increases your secondary battery survivability by 100%, and your AA guns as well, so that's kind of nice. Since we're building to secondaries, we obviously want them to survive as long as possible, and that's what this does. And then go to your third mod slot, and you want to select Secondary Battery Mod 1. This increases the range of your secondary guns by 20%, while giving them a 20% buff to their dispersion as well. So again, you're getting your range out more, that reload time down faster to give you a faster DPM rate on your secondaries. So again, boosting their performance that much more. And then in the 6 module slot, you want to take Auxiliary Armaments Mod 2. This further reduces your secondary battery reload time by another 20%, so another good pickup for your secondary performance. Again, everything else, leave it the same as in the base build. So again, for this build, your module should look like that. Alright, for your commander skills now, 3-point skill. You want to swap out Basics of Survivability for long-range secondary battery shells. This gives you another 20% to your secondary guns range. Again, we want to get them out as far as we possibly can. And then for your 4-point skills, what you got to do here is pick between Fire Prevention or Concealment Expert and take Manual Secondary Battery Aiming. This will give you a 50% boost to your secondary battery accuracy over 45 seconds of them firing, on top of a 10% accuracy boost just out the gate and a 10% reload buff out the gate when you manually select a target for your secondaries guns to fire by clicking on them in game. What you give up for this skill should depend on what you're playing. If it's the Schlieffen, I would give up the Fire Prevention due to the maximum secondary battery range being the same as the Schlieffen's minimum concealment with a module and commander skill equipped, which means that once a ship spots you and is in your standard detection range, they are in your secondary battery range. Most other secondary battleships I would give up concealment instead, because while they are fairly tanky, fires, again, don't care about your armor and burn you either way, and you don't want to get 4 instances of fire on you. The Schlieffen has the fast damage con, so it can kind of deal with that better than your standard battleship. So that's what I do with 99% again of secondary battleships. Now, if you're looking for a bit more of a unconventional build that you could run with it, you won't survive for very long with this build, but you'll make some magic happen with it at full tilt for sure. And that's what I like to call the Crackhead build. So, the Crackhead build is, well, let's just get into it. Just as a preview, it's only really good with high-tier British battle cruisers and battleships. So what you want to do is swap out from the standard build Damage Con Mod 1 with Engine Room Protection, which reduces the chance of your engine and steering gears getting knocked out by 20%, and reduces their repair time by 20% as well. And swap out Damage Con Mod 2 with Steering Gears Mod 1, which gives you a 20% buff to your rudder shift time. And be sure to take the reload module in that last slot as well. Again, everything else leave it the same as the standard build. The real fun begins with the commander build. Again, going off of the standard build, replace Basics of Survivability with super heavy AP shells. This gives you an increase of your burn time by 25%, but reduces the damage fires due to you by 10%. Same with flooding damage. In exchange, you get a 7.5% damage buff to your AP shells. This will make sense in a second. Swap Fire Prevention to Close Quarters Combat for the 10% buff to your reload time when there's an enemy ship in your detection range. And lastly, swap Concealment Expert for Furious. Furious gives you a 10% buff to your reload time for the first instance of fire or flooding on your ship, and then a 5% buff for each instance thereafter. Which means if you put this on a ship like St. Vincent and get 4 instances of fires or floods with Close Quarters Combat, you'll roughly have a 15-second reload time on our 457mm guns that are enjoying a 7.5% buff to their AP Alpha with the St. Vinny's Super Hill. So with that all equipped, and then again you throw Adrenaline Rush on top of that too, with that Super Heal, you can manage the fire damage quite well because that's all repairable, and you have this heal that can reprint most of your ship's HP with a single button. So the St. Vinny, you don't really care too much that you're on fire in 3 places and have an instance of flooding on top of that. Again, you can repair all that with the simple push of the button, but now you have her 9 18-inch guns with a 15-second reload, literally a heavy cruiser reload on 18-inch guns on a ship that's now, I mean, it's already a super fast ship with the engine boost, but now you're taking the steering gears module, so it literally maneuvers like a cruiser at this point. So now you're slinging out these 18-inch shells every 15 seconds while running around at, like, what's the top speed of the St. Vincent? Like, it touches 40 knots, right? It's just a ridiculous build. And you can do this with the Conqueror, with the Incomparable, or any ship that does have a super heal. So again, it's mostly the higher tier British ships. It's a goofy build. You run around like a crackhead on fire, slinging your 18-inch shells every 15 seconds, and you can put in some work. You do have to be super careful, of course, about your heal and using that at the right moment and opting to disengage whenever you can, because things can get a little bit too hot, because that heal's nice, but once it's used, and you gotta kind of, you know, hide for a second and wait for it to come off a cooldown. Is it a super viable build? No, but it is one that can work, and it is quite fun. So again, these are the basic-ish Battleship builds for 2024 that I've been using that works quite well. Again, some ships have some different parameters where you might swap out one or two of these commander skills of one of these modules, but this is a great place to start, and if you just need a build to get you going and get you performing well in game, any of these will do you well. Again, the main build, you can slap that on any battleship in game and it will be performing quite well. Secondary build for those secondary ships, again, they'll do fine with those. So again, a lot of it is knowing your ship and what commander skill or module you might need to swap out that'll help it. Like if you have the Anhalt, for example, Brisk is great on the Anhalt because it's slow, but it's got a pretty good detection range, and you can, you know, make use of Brisk, and when you're undetected, scoot around a little bit more. Same with any battleship that has a good concealment. You can do that if you want to, but that's just one example. So again, these are some battleship builds that'll get you going in 2024 and get you just, you know, and do well by you. So guys, let me know in the comments down below any build that you would like to throw out there for anybody looking for a battleship build that you think might do quite well. Throw that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Helps out on the YouTube side of things, of course. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.